All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the absolutely fascinating story of a humble Indian saint who completely unawarely mentored some of the modern world's most powerful people. I mean, we are looking at a man who literally spent his days sitting on a wooden bench, wrapped in a simple plaid blanket, entirely unattached to the material world, and yet his teachings would eventually ripple out to shape the very foundations of the tech devices we use every single day, and even the entertainment we consume. So, right off the bat, we've got to ask, what on earth connects Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, and Julia Roberts? On the surface, absolutely nothing, right? They operate in completely different spheres of intense global pressure. But if you trace their paths of personal growth and professional clarity back to a singular source, you don't find a high-powered executive coach or some prestigious university. You find an Indian mystic who left his physical form back in 1973, yet somehow managed to guide these titans of industry through their most challenging periods. It's honestly a wild juxtaposition. On one hand, you've got this relentless pursuit of innovation, the drive for immense wealth, and the hyper-fast pace of Silicon Valley and Hollywood. And on the other, you have Neem Karoli Baba, affectionately known by his followers as Maharajji. He was a man who owned practically nothing at all, often just slipping into deep silence to pour peace over his devotees. It's exactly this stark, almost unbelievable contrast that made his teachings so magnetically appealing to folks sitting at the very top of the corporate ladder. And it was this exact contrast that sparked a literal pilgrimage starting in the 1970s. We're talking about the most driven minds in Silicon Valley packing up and heading to the Himalayas for spiritual guidance. It all began with a young Steve Jobs, who traveled to the Kanchi ashram in India, just searching for something beyond the material world. Now, Neem Karoli Baba had actually passed away just prior to Jobs' arrival, but the atmosphere and the disciples profoundly impacted him. Fast forward a few decades, Facebook is facing this critical juncture of rapid expansion and uncertainty. And who tells Mark Zuckerberg to visit that very same ashram to find his direction? Steve Jobs. Even Jack Dorsey, the co-founder of Twitter and Square, has integrated the principles of this exact spiritual lineage into his high-stakes leadership style. Just listen to Steve Jobs here. He actually explicitly credits his time at the ashram for shaping the entire design philosophy that would eventually define Apple. He realized that true innovation wasn't about adding more and more complexity. It was about stripping away the non-essential. This singular focus on simplicity and clarity of vision, which, let's face it, are the absolute hallmarks of Apple's success, was deeply nurtured by that spiritual atmosphere and the lingering teachings of Neem Karoli Baba. It is wild to think that the sleek smartphone sitting in your pocket right now has roots in a quiet Himalayan retreat. But, long before he became this invisible mentor to tech billionaires, who was the man actually sitting beneath that blanket? Well, born Lakshman Narayan Sharma around the year 1900 in an Indian village, he was married at just 11 years old, but felt this totally irresistible spiritual calling. So he left home at a remarkably young age to become a wandering sadhu, a holy person who renounces worldly life entirely. For decades, he just wandered across northern India, going by various names like Lakshman Das or the Handiwala Baba, devoting his life completely to spiritual practice and deliberately avoiding the spotlight. Now, to really grasp his mystical aura, we have to look at a highly cinematic anecdote. Seriously, how does a ticketless wanderer stop a literal moving train? It's a story that sounds like something straight out of a blockbuster movie, but it's the defining legend that transformed this wandering ascetic into the widely revered Neem Karoli Baba. Okay, so back in 1958, an angry ticket collector kicks him off a first-class train compartment for traveling without a ticket at a tiny village called Neem Karoli. The sadhu quietly goes over, sits under a tree, and plants his tongs into the ground. When the guards signal the train to leave, the steam engine is pushed to absolute full force, but the wheels just spin in place. The train wouldn't budge a single inch. Engineers check everything, every single mechanism, but find zero mechanical faults. Finally, the passengers, who recognized his spiritual stature, urge the officials to apologize. They beg him to reboard. He agrees, but only on the condition that the railway builds a station for that specific village. The very moment he steps back onto that train, it immediately starts moving. And from that day on, he was known as the Baba of Neem Karoli, or Neem Karoli Baba. To really understand the stories surrounding him and his intense devotion to the Hindu deity Hanuman, we need to define this ancient spiritual concept, siddhi. His followers fervently believed that through his intense austerity and devotion, he had actually attained these perfected psychic abilities. He was known to suddenly appear completely unannounced, read the minds of his devotees, and even distribute impossible amounts of food from a tiny supply. But the key here? despite these seemingly miraculous abilities, he literally never used them for personal gain or self-promotion. But here's the thing. Despite all these reputed miracles, his actual day-to-day philosophy was incredibly grounded. It was literally a perfect antidote to modern burnout. He didn't preach these complex, rigid dogmas. Instead, he emphasized universal love and compassion, just treating everyone with kindness without expecting a single thing back. He championed seva, or selfless service, and he advocated heavily for mindfulness, fostering a deep connection with your true inner self. For tech leaders navigating cutthroat, high-stakes competition, these three pillars provided an absolutely essential psychological anchor. Take this concept of seva, for instance. It completely defies the profit-driven motives we see in the business world, yet it deeply resonated with these tech titans. Seva is all about acting purely for the benefit of others. Now, think about Silicon Valley, where pretty much every action is tied to a metric, a return on investment, or a stock price. The idea of doing something with absolutely zero expectation of reward, that is a radical shift. It helps these leaders detach their self-worth from their net worth, fostering this sense of grounded humanity that actually ends up enhancing their long-term decision-making. And the craziest part? His influence didn't even require a physical introduction. Take Julia Roberts. She experienced this spontaneous spiritual awakening literally just from seeing a photograph of him. Roberts revealed in an interview that she never met the Baba. He had passed away long before she ever even knew he existed. But the second she saw his picture, she felt an immediate magnetic pull. It wasn't some loud, crashing revelation. It was just this quiet, profound sense of familiarity that drew her right into exploring Hindu spirituality. What's really fascinating here is that this wasn't some dramatic lightning bolt epiphany. It was this gentle, organic shift that just kind of permeated her whole life and career. This spiritual journey actually led her to travel to the Kanchi dham ashram with her family so she could experience that stillness firsthand. She even wove this newfound philosophy right into her Hollywood career, naming her production company Red Om Films, after the sacred syllable representing the essence of the universe. It just goes to show how adaptable and deeply personal Neem Karoli Baba's passive influence can be. So when you look at the relentless, almost punishing high-wire act of the tech industry, it totally makes sense why leaders like Jack Dorsey use these teachings as a safety net. The industry demands constant innovation, constant achievement, and it creates this absolute whirlwind of stress. The teachings of Neem Karoli Baba provide a crucial, much-needed counterbalance. The practice of mindfulness and meditation literally allows these leaders to step out of the chaotic noise of boardrooms and algorithms and just return to a baseline of inner peace and self-awareness. Now, Neem Karoli Baba's physical journey ended just as peacefully as he lived. On September 11, 1973, while traveling, he had severe chest pains and was rushed to a hospital in Vrindavan. The doctors there declared he had slipped into a diabetic coma. Yet his final actions were entirely peaceful. He asked for holy Ganga water, chanted a prayer hailing the Lord of the universe a few times, and quietly left his body. But as we've seen, his story was really just beginning for the rest of the world. Because even though he left his physical body, his tangible impact on the world was really just getting started. His ashrams, especially Kanchi Dham, are still these massive global pilgrimage sites today. Western disciples like Ram Dass went on to write huge best-selling books that introduced his teachings to millions. But honestly, perhaps the most staggering physical legacy he left behind is the Seva Foundation. Founded by his disciples, including Dr. Larry Brilliant and Ram Dass, this international health organization put that concept of seva into literal, boots-on-the-ground action, restoring eyesight to over 3.5 million blind people across the globe. That right there, that is the true power of his teachings manifested in the real world. So I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder as you navigate your own fast-paced life. We might not be running billion-dollar tech companies or starring in massive Hollywood blockbusters, but every single one of us faces the pressures and anxieties of modern life. If the brightest minds of our generation found clarity and strength in the simple teachings of a man who owned absolutely nothing but a plaid blanket, what could embracing a little bit of that simplicity do for you? Think about it. How can you incorporate just one small act of selfless service, or maybe a moment of quiet mindfulness, into your day-to-day? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning and keep learning.